My name is Edward. The moment I heard my wife say something that confirmed the doubts I had tried to bury for years, it didn't just hurt, it shattered me. That one sentence was the final thread holding our fragile marriage together. And once it broke, there was no repairing what was left. This is the journey that led to that moment, the events that built up to it, what I felt when I heard her say those words, and the decision I made in the aftermath. So let me take you back to where it all began. I met Brittany during a time when both of us were quietly battling our own sense of isolation. In that shared emptiness, we somehow found comfort in each other. I was still mourning the recent loss of my father, my only remaining family. My mother had passed when I was just 7 years old, and from then on, my dad became everything to me. He raised me on his own, doing all he could to provide a good life. Even with his long working hours, he always found time to help me with homework, attend school events, and support me in all the little ways that mattered. As I grew up, graduated, and found a stable career, I looked forward to the day I could repay him. I wanted to take him on a vacation, care for him, give him the peace he had given me. But life had other plans. Just when things were finally beginning to settle, his cancer returned. He had beaten it once before, but this time it came back with a vengeance. It happened so fast, before I could truly grasp what was happening, he was gone. I was devastated and alone. My friends were wrapped up in their own lives, and I didn't have siblings or close relatives to turn to. That's when Brittany came into my life. She had recently moved to the neighborhood, just a few houses down from my dad. We'd only met a few times casually. But during the final weeks of my father's illness, there were days I couldn't be there because of work. I asked Brittany if she wouldn't mind checking in on him occasionally. She didn't hesitate. She was warm, considerate, and quiet, never dramatic, but always reliable. She brought over groceries, reminded him to take his meds, and sometimes just sat with him to keep him company. My dad adored her. As time passed, I began talking to her more, not just about him, but about life in general. She never tried to fix anything. She just listened. And in those quiet conversations, something between us started to grow. After my father's funeral, the silence inside that house became overwhelming. It felt empty in a way I can't explain. Brittany was the only person who felt familiar, someone who had witnessed that chapter of my life alongside me. She understood my grief without needing any explanation. We started spending more time together. It wasn't dramatic or romantic in a movie-like way, but it was steady and safe, something I could rely on. Looking back now, I can see I mistook that sense of comfort for true emotional connection. There was no real spark, not the kind I had felt in past relationships. But I convinced myself that maybe those sparks were overrated anyway. Maybe choosing someone dependable and kind was better than chasing passion that would eventually fade. That was the story I told myself. So when we finally began dating, it wasn't some whirlwind romance. It was quiet, cautious. Two people leaning on each other because there was no one else to turn to. And perhaps that was where the foundation cracked. Because when something starts from a place of survival, it doesn't always lead to something lasting. But I didn't know that back then. I truly believed we were building something permanent. That belief would later be challenged, but at the time, I thought we were doing just fine. And after everything I had endured, fine felt like a blessing. Or at least that's what I wanted to believe. 2 years passed. We moved in together, shared a life that looked stable on the outside. Then one evening, while we were sitting in the living room like we always did, she turned to me casually and said, "Maybe we should just get married." I remember sitting there, completely caught off guard, not upset, just surprised. Marriage hadn't been on my mind in that moment, but as I looked at her, I thought, why not? Here was someone who stood by me when everything in my life was falling apart. She didn't back away when things got hard. She was there through the heaviness and silence that followed my dad's passing. Even though she rarely spoke about it, she helped carry the weight of that grief. When you're in pieces, someone's loyalty can start to feel a lot like love. I convinced myself this is what real, grown-up relationships must be, less about passion and more about consistency. Maybe love wasn't supposed to feel like sparks and intensity. Maybe it was meant to feel like stability, like a flame that never burned out, even if it never burned bright. So I said yes. We didn't go all out with a celebration. Neither of us had many relatives, and I didn't have the emotional bandwidth for something elaborate. We held a quiet ceremony, intimate and small. Just a few people. But there's something I never voiced at the time, something I already sensed deep down. Even before we said our vows, I could feel the cracks forming. From the very beginning, Brittany had a way of keeping her emotions tightly locked away. She never opened up. Whenever I tried to share how I felt or talk about something meaningful, she'd just stare at me blankly, offering no reaction, no response. I tried to understand. I figured not everyone expresses themselves the same way. Maybe she had been through something in her past that made her cautious, made her guarded. I gave her every excuse, every possible explanation to make sense of it. I told myself love didn't have to come with constant affirmations. That maybe needing to hear, "I love you," all the time was a childish expectation. But if I'm honest, I don't think she ever said it unless I said it first. It was never unprompted. Never from her heart, just spilling out in a moment of feeling. So when she brought up marriage, I thought maybe this was her way of showing me how she felt. Maybe she couldn't say the words, but this commitment meant she cared. She was choosing me. I believed it meant something. I thought she was finally opening up. But I was mistaken. And I wouldn't understand just how mistaken I was until much later. After the wedding, I kept hoping things would shift. That with time, our emotional bond would deepen. Or at the very least, settle into something warmer, more secure. But the reality was different. If anything, things slowly began to decline. Looking back, there was never a honeymoon phase. No new joy, no strengthened connection. Just a slow, quiet unraveling of the hope I had pinned on our future together. It started with small things. Brittany became withdrawn, sometimes for days. She'd grow distant, moody, even cold, and I never really knew why. I'd come home and try to engage, ask how her day had gone. Her response would be a dull shrug or a lifeless, "Fine." It was like sharing space with someone who had carefully constructed an emotional barrier, and no matter how gently I tried to reach her, I couldn't find a way past it. What hurt most was the way she always dismissed my concern. When I asked if something was bothering her, she'd wave it off with a vague answer, "It's just hormones," or "I'm probably starting my period," or "I didn't sleep well." That was the extent of it. Nothing that led to a meaningful conversation. Nothing that made me feel like she wanted to let me in. Over time, I got the message. Stop asking. And so I did. I stopped pushing. I told myself not to take it personally, even though it felt incredibly personal. Because when the person you love keeps turning away, it begins to feel like rejection, even if they never say it outright. The truth is, I wasn't truly content. I kept that to myself, though, because this was the woman who stood beside me during one of the darkest chapters of my life. She was there after I lost my dad. She showed up when everything inside me was falling apart. In my heart, I felt like that kind of loyalty deserved grace, patience. So I kept showing up, too. I tried to be steady. I gave her space whenever she seemed to need it. I believed that if I just kept showing up with love, kept being consistent and supportive, eventually something would shift between us. Then, out of the blue, she told me she had decided to start therapy. I remember how much hope that sparked in me. I thought maybe this was the beginning of a real change. Perhaps she was finally ready to unpack whatever she had been bottling up for so long. Maybe, just maybe, we could begin having honest conversations. Maybe we could start to rebuild something real between us. I offered to go with her, to be part of the process. She declined, said she needed to do it alone. Even after her sessions began, Nothing really changed. She didn't open up about what she was working through, didn't share insights or feelings, or even hint at what she might be discovering in those sessions. I would ask gently, "How did it go today?" And her answer would be a vague, emotionless, "It was fine," or "Nothing special." Then she'd quickly move on to another subject. I didn't want to overstep or pressure her. I respected her privacy, but I was her husband. And yet, I felt like a stranger watching from a distance. Still, I held on. I told myself she would let me in when she was ready. One Thursday, my afternoon meeting was canceled, so I left the office earlier than usual and headed home. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car I didn't immediately recognize, until it clicked. It belonged to one of her friends. I'd seen it once or twice before. I walked through the front door. The house was quiet. Then, from the back porch, I heard soft laughter, hers, along with another voice. I figured they were just catching up over drinks. Nothing unusual. I wasn't planning to intrude, just thought I'd say a quick hello before going upstairs to change. As I moved toward the back door, I suddenly heard Brittany speak, and I stopped. Something in her tone made me freeze. I lingered just behind the door, not out of suspicion, but instinct. And then her voice came through, slightly slurred, like she'd had a few glasses of wine. "I didn't marry Edward because I was in love with him," she said. I went still. "I married him because I couldn't stand the idea of being alone," she continued. "He's sweet, kind of boring, but safe. I just needed someone stable." It was like every ounce of air had been sucked out of the room. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. Her friend responded, clearly shocked too. "Wait, you don't love him?" And Brittany answered without hesitation, "No, I never did. I thought maybe it would happen over time. But it didn't. I was just too tired of dating. He felt like the safest option." Those words tore right through me. In that single moment, every question I'd ignored, every strange silence, every distant glance suddenly made sense. Her detachment, her emotional coldness, the way she'd pull away and never really let me in. Even the time she casually said, "I don't really believe in soulmates," and I'd laughed it off like it was just a joke. She hadn't been joking. She had never loved me, not from the start. I was a shelter from the storm. A choice made out of exhaustion, not affection. I didn't step outside. I turned away, numb, and moved quietly back through the house like a ghost drifting through his own home. I walked upstairs, entered my home office, and closed the door behind me. Then I locked it. I had never locked that door before. Neither of us had ever felt the need. But that night, I needed a barrier, something solid between me and the rest of the world. I needed that door shut. I sat in that room for what felt like hours, just staring, sinking. Eventually, I heard footsteps coming up the stairs. Brittany's friend must have left. She must have seen my car parked out front. She came to the office and tried the doorknob. It didn't turn. I had locked her out. I heard the doorknob rattle, followed by soft knocking. "Edward." Her voice was cautious. "Are you in there?" I stayed silent. A few seconds passed before she knocked again, this time with a hint of confusion in her tone. Then my phone started buzzing. It was her. I picked it up and said quietly, "Please, just leave me alone." She didn't say anything. I ended the call. She didn't try to reach out again that night. Maybe she thought I was upset about something trivial. She had no idea I'd overheard every word. No idea that she had cracked something open inside me that couldn't be sealed again. I didn't leave that office once. I sat in the dark until morning, and by the time the sky started to lighten, everything was clear. I wasn't angry anymore. There wasn't any bitterness left. Just certainty. We didn't have children. No house we owned together. Nothing tying us together but a marriage that clearly never meant what it was supposed to, not to her. The only real gift I'd given her was the car I bought on our last anniversary. That was it. I waited until she left for work. Once I heard the door close behind her and the sound of her car fading down the road, I got up. I packed my things in silence. Then I stepped out of the house, locked the door behind me, and walked away without looking back. I had no set destination in mind. I checked into a nearby hotel, sat stiffly on the edge of the mattress, and opened my laptop. I emailed my boss, letting him know I had to take the day off due to a personal emergency. A few hours later, he replied, telling me to take whatever time I needed. Then I contacted a divorce attorney. There was no turning back. Later that day, Brittany returned to an empty house. Her first few calls came rapid fire, back to back. I ignored every one. Eventually, I picked up. "Where are you?" she asked. "Why are your things gone?" I didn't dodge it. I told her the truth. I'm not going to be a stand-in for someone else's emotions anymore. She sounded genuinely confused, like she couldn't make sense of what I was saying. So I spelled it out. I've been living in a loveless marriage for nearly 4 years, and I can't keep pretending it's something it's not. I'm done. There was silence on her end. Maybe she was trying to find the right words. I didn't wait. I ended the call. I didn't answer any more of her calls after that. I didn't respond to her messages either. There was no need to fight over accounts. I'd stopped using our joint account long ago. My paycheck hadn't gone into it for months. There was nothing left to separate except our names. A few days later, the divorce papers were officially delivered to her. I imagine that's when she realized this wasn't temporary, that I wasn't bluffing. She must have asked the attorney for the reason, and I'm sure he told her exactly what I'd told him. That's when she changed tactics. She began reaching out through mutual friends. Some messaged me saying she was making progress in therapy, that she was finally starting to understand herself, that she was trying to become a better person. Maybe she was. I wasn't bitter about that. But it didn't matter anymore. To everyone who reached out on her behalf, I said the same thing. I'm done. Not out of vengeance. Not to punish her. Just because I had nothing left to give. I had tried. I had waited. I had hoped. And when none of that worked, I accepted that some things don't get fixed. Not every story ends neatly. One of the final steps I took was to request my name be removed from the lease. I'd co-signed when we moved in, but I didn't want to be tied to that place, or that life, any longer. Eventually, the paperwork was all finalized. Divorce complete. Lease updated. Every legal tie untangled. The chapter closed. Even so, Brittany still reaches out from time to time. A random call. A message here or there. She thinks maybe we can be friends now. I'm not sure. Once in a while, I'll respond to a text, usually only if it feels important or urgent. Not because I want to reconnect. Just out of a small, lingering respect for what we once tried to be. Or maybe just to avoid stirring up more mess. But as far as the relationship goes, as far as the marriage, the life we were supposed to build, it's gone. Completely. And I'm at peace with that.